come to the conclusion that a great number of problems in this world with modern gadgets and devices can be resolved just by turning them off and turning them back on again. Sometimes my laptop will stop doing certain functions and it'll start to glitch, and I found all you got to do is turn it off and then back on and the problem works itself out. Every now and then my cell phone turns into the opposite of a smartphone, but I won't tell you what I want to call it, and the same remedy cures the problem. Just reset it. It seems that electronic devices sometimes need to take a nap, kind of like I do. You have to reset and start over sometimes. However, if I'm ever on life support for something, I don't suggest unplugging me and plugging me back in just to see if that works. Don't try that. But sometimes everything needs a reset. Where we are in Genesis, the earth has just undergone a major reset. God is now beginning the world with 8 people to be the new Adam and Eve. This planet is no longer a paradise like Adam and Eve had, though. It's a planet full of danger. It's a planet full of hardships. And as mankind begins to repopulate the earth, it doesn't go as smoothly this time. Lifespans are going to be significantly shorter, and it's going to decrease with each generation. Some animals are now violent predators, and all animals now have the fear of mankind. The weather on this new world after the flood is now going to be harsh. There's going to be temperature extremes and hot and extremes and cold as seasons now change. And the global moderate temperature has been gone since the vapor canopy that was overhead has gone. Now the world is capable of producing rain, which is good, but also lightning, hail, tornadoes, tsunamis, hurricanes, and earthquakes. We are a long ways from the paradise of Eden that Adam and Eve had. So let us join Noah and his family as they star in the season premiere of Survivor, Life on Planet Earth. Let's begin in Genesis 9 with verses 1 through 4. And God blessed Noah and his sons and said to them, Be fruitful and multiply and fill the earth. The fear of you and the terror of you will be on every beast of the earth and on every bird of the sky, with everything that creeps on the ground, and all fish of the sea. Into your hand they are given. Every moving thing that is alive shall be food for you. I give all to you as I gave the green plant. Only you shall not eat flesh with its life, that is, blood. Just as God had commanded Adam and Eve, God told Noah's family to be fruitful and multiply and fill the earth. Before the flood, some commentators speculate that the world population was several million people. Other people factor in these 900-plus year lifespans and estimate the world was probably into the billions as far as population pre-flood. Only now, people don't live that long, so that means less children being born. Add to that, the world has a more severe climate. Things are drastically different. It took thousands of years for the population to finally get back to where it was pre-flood, if it really numbered into the billions, as some people say. In 1760, the world population was 770 million people. Now, that is from that point in Genesis 9, where there was 8 people, all the way into 1760, just shortly before the birth of America. During the time of George Washington's life, 770 million people were on this planet. There are countries today that have more than that themselves. The 1 billion mark was finally reached in 1804, but in 1900 it was 1.6 billion, so it's almost doubled within 100 years. In the last century, that has quadrupled. We recently hit the 8 billion people mark. I definitely say we have fulfilled the command to multiply and fill the earth. While I was researching these numbers, though, I found a statement that was really interesting, and I don't know how true this could possibly be, but it's an interesting food for thought. It says around 108 billion people in total have ever lived on our planet. That means that today's population size is only 6.5% the total number of people ever born. I don't know if there really was 108 billion total people from Adam and Eve all the way until till now. I don't know how they ever would tell. It's all got to be guesstimation. I always love that word, guesstimation. But whether that number is close or not, or if there are many more than that or less than that, I can't help but think of the amazing fact that God knows. And he knows the name of every last one of them. Not only that, he can tell you about every detail of his life in his perfect knowledge. God took special care to ensure that humanity would not face extinction by making the animals fear us in verse 2. We don't have to worry about tigers or lions eating the sons of Noah right away. At first, it may have been that, these animals were on the ark. Most of them were very young when they were on the ark. That way, they eat less and they take up less space. And they would be the prime breeding age by the time the ark landed. So those generations that were on the generations of animals on the ark might have become pretty tame over time. They're familiar with Noah. They're familiar with his family. And maybe they lingered around a little bit longer because they were used to Noah feeding them. But God made sure that they would leave that area and start feeling the earth themselves. We covered last time how they were able to make the journey to these other continents due to these land bridges that were exposed because the oceans had not yet reached their current depth from melting ice caps. But since we've been given the green light in verse 3 to eat all of these animals, it's a good thing that they see us as predators now. Otherwise, they'd become extinct from being overhunted and overharvested. Now, there are some out there that teach that mankind were vegetarians before the flood. Now, that's definitely the case in the Garden of Eden, where God instructed Adam to eat the green plants and the fruits. But after expulsion from the garden, God was the first one to take the life of an animal because he gave Adam and Eve a covering out of animal skins. That means taking the animal's life. That means that blood was shed because of sin. I don't think the animal just gave up its skin and went around wearing meat all the time. So yes, the animal's life was taken then. We see later on that Abel was raising livestock and bringing portions of the fat and the firstlings as a sacrifice to the Lord. Since the ground had been cursed and food was harder to obtain, it makes sense to think that they began to at least eat some of the animals to get by, especially if you're going to the trouble of raising them like Abel was. But here, God makes it clear that meat is back on the menu. Notice there have been no exclusions for clean and unclean. He said everything that moves. Life is going to be tough on this newly reshaped earth. It's going to be quite some time before fields are cleared and crops are planted. Orchards are going to be decades before they're ready for use. So it was basically eat whatever you can find. We have nights like that at my house. Whenever me and my wife are both tired from a long day, we tell the kids just eat whatever you can find. We do a count later to make sure that all of our animals are still intact. There were no dietary restrictions placed upon the food until Leviticus chapter 11, many generations later. And even then, it was only for the nation of Israel, not to ensure food safety, because that had a part of it, but to separate Israel from the other nations, to make them distinct. Later, after Christ, in Acts chapter 10, Peter hears what God has cleansed no longer consider unholy. But even before that, Jesus declared foods clean in Matthew 15:11. He said, "It's not what enters into the mouth that defiles the man, but what proceeds out of the mouth. This defiles the man." So right then, at that point, all animals were fair game. And to keep it fair to the animals, their instinct now made them afraid of us. There are times when animals will attack, but that's usually when they feel threatened, when they're cornered or something like that. Or if you get between a mama and their young. I've worked cattle enough in my life to know that when a mama cow fears no man when her calf bleeds and somebody has a hold of it, branding it or putting an ear tag in it. Sometimes animals in the wild will even attack, but for the most part, their instinct is to run and go the other direction. Have you ever noticed when you see a deer on the highway, their IQ seems to drop by 100 points? They'll just stare in your headlights until the last possible minute. They'll take their time crossing the road, and more will come out right in front of you, and you have to slam on your brakes. There's times when they'll stand in the road and just stare at you. I've had them literally run run right into my car. I'll come to a complete stop and they will still run into me several times. But if you're away from your car and you're out walking in the woods, the second that they see you, they are gone. They can hear you blink from 500 yards away. They can smell your laundry detergent in your clothes from 300 yards and they'll scatter. Why is that? Well, they're not given a fear of cars. Not until they get hit by one the first time anyway. But they were not made by their creator to be afraid of vehicles or be afraid of our houses or to be afraid of anything that we build. They were given the fear of mankind by God. So they flee from us, but they become oblivious when they're on the road. So finally, just as Adam was given one single rule in the garden, which he and Eve broke, Noah and his family and all of us today are given a rule when it comes to eating animals. Don't eat it with the lifeblood still in it. Now, no, that's not a command against having your steak rare or medium rare. Don't go rushing off to your friend or your spouse and say, see, right here, Rick said that you can't have medium rare steak. It's in the Bible. No. People's going to call my rare steaks gross, and then they'll go out and eat sushi, raw fish, as if that's okay. I see no difference in the two. At least my steak was cooked for a little while. It's better some than none at all. But anyway, off of that soapbox, this is actually about the respect for the life of the animal and the loss for its life. I've heard about some native tribes that would actually pray and give thanks and even thank the animal respectfully. An animal should not be wasted but used for the survival of the person that harvested it and their family. When I deer hunt, I don't just shoot one for the sake of killing something or gaining a trophy on the wall. That meat helps stretch the grocery budget, which is really helpful in this economy that we're in. So the animal must be killed as humanely as possible, and the blood must be drained. Leviticus 17 plainly says that you are not to eat the blood, so it must be properly dressed. It must be properly prepared. But don't think that this only applied to the Jews, and this only applied to the Old Testament, because Acts chapter 15 verse 20 tells us that the restriction to avoid blood carries over to the Gentiles and to modern believers. You might wonder, well, who in the world actually eats blood today? Well, people in Mongolia have what is called a blood pie. It's made of horse meat and real blood. Thankfully, I'll have no problem resisting the temptation to eat that monstrosity. Let us continue on into verses 5 through 7. Surely I will require your lifeblood from every beast. I will require it, and from every man, and from every man's brother, I will require the life of man. Whoever sheds man's blood, by man his blood shall be shed. For in the image of God he made man. As for you, be fruitful and multiply. Populate the earth abundantly and multiply in it. According to these verses, when somebody's life is taken, there has to be an accounting. The world before the flood, it was so full of violence. It started with Cain. Cain was mercifully allowed to be exiled instead of killed. Then Lamech from Cain's lineage killed a man and a young boy, and he bragged about it. And we're told later on in Genesis that the world was filled with violence. God didn't mean for life that he created to be treated so cheaply. We are made in the image of God. If somebody kills somebody on purpose, it says here that they are to be killed in return. By man, his blood shall be shed. There's a great many people out there today that have a problem with this. And if you do, don't tune me out. I'm not telling you my personal opinion. We're going to go through what the Bible says. A lot of people out there oppose the death penalty. Every time there's an execution in the prison in the town, which is not too far from here, there's protesters outside of that prison. It doesn't matter if the person being executed killed 20 people or buried them alive or done something in the most heinous fashion possible and shows no remorse. People think that executing them is barbaric. Another thing that I've noticed is that the majority of those who protest these executions also believe in a woman's right to abortion. They want to free somebody who rapes and kills people, but have absolutely no problem murdering an innocent baby. How can people be so blind to such irony? Well, the devil's behind that. So, by the way, when God says that there's going to be an accounting for whoever sheds human's blood, there will be millions of people on Judgment Day who will give an account for their support of abortion. I'm not trying to say this to condemn someone who has had one and who has regretted it. They are going through enough suffering because of their own conscience. And if you've done that, God stands ready to receive you. If you come to Him in repentance, He will forgive them just as much as He has forgiven me and the rest of us for every other kind of sin as well. But those who continue to support infanticide, those who perform the procedure, and those who vote for leaders that promote such killing are going to be equally accountable. The blood of those infants is just as precious to God as the blood of every other person. And when He says He will demand an account for each and every one, I believe that applies here. And allow me to clarify a few things, though, about executions and the death penalty. For the first thing, for those who misquote the Bible and say, well, the Bible says, thou shalt not kill, that doesn't apply to capital executions. The more accurate translations, if you get out of the King James a minute, well, you will find it says, you shall not commit murder. There's a big difference between murder and justifiable execution. One big difference is that God has ordained institutions of government for such a purpose. You don't get to go around and kill the party yourself. You don't get to go around and be a vigilante. There has to be a trial. There has to be a due process, and to be as absolutely sure as possible that the party is indeed guilty. Now, this process did not go out with the eye for an eye law for the Old Testament either. This also carries into the New Testament, as we see in Romans chapter 13. It says, every person is to be in subjection to governing authorities, for there is no authority except from God, and those which exist are established by God. Therefore, whoever resists authority has opposed the ordinance of God, and they who have opposed will receive condemnation upon themselves. For rulers are not a cause of fear for good behavior, but for evil. Do you want to have no fear of authority? Do what is good, and you will have praise from the same. For it is a minister of God to you for good. But if you do what is evil, be afraid, for it does not bear the sword for nothing. For it is a minister of God, an avenger who brings wrath on the one who practices evil. The government in Paul's day bore the sword. Evildoers were often beheaded with a sword. Today, the government bears lethal injection. They used to bear the electric chair. They used to bear a noose hanging from a tree limb even before that. Some people call that cruel and inhuman, with this lethal injection, but never mind the atrocities that the condemned person did was probably a lot more painful to their victims than what they're feeling, and it's definitely more painful than a firing squad or something like that in the older days. They're simply going to sleep. And number two, sometimes the taking of a life is unintentional. Then special consideration should be given on a case-by-case basis. For example, there's a law, I think it's in the book of Deuteronomy, I'm not for sure, but it's somewhere in there, that states, for example, if you have an ox and that ox gores somebody, you have to destroy that ox, blood for blood. And then you have to pay the victim for the damages. That's a non-intentional injury. You don't deserve the death penalty for that. But it also says that if you have an ox that has a history of being mean and you've never done anything about it, and then it injures somebody or it injures multiple people again and again, you are guilty, because you knew it was a problem and your negligence caused another person bodily harm. Let's bring this back into modern terms. If you have a dog that bites someone, assuming that said person wasn't trespassing on your property, assuming they weren't threatening you because a dog's instinct is to protect its owners, then the law states that you have to destroy the animal if it just bit somebody for no reason. If you have a mean dog and he has bitten several people in the past, and then he maul somebody again, you're in serious trouble. Another example would be drunk drivers. They made a choice to break what they know is a law. Everybody knows you are not supposed to drink and drive. And when they do so, they are purposely endangering those that are around them. To me, that's not manslaughter. That's murder, because you knew it was wrong and you knew this was a chance and you made that choice. If a human services caseworker takes a child, and I've seen this within our own church, takes a child from an abusive home and gives it to someone where it's raised and nurtured and cared for, but then later on returns that child to the abuser when there's no signs of improvement, I believe that they should be held liable to the same extent as the one who did the abuse. Their job was to protect, and poor judgment caused a situation where that child was once again harmed where it was harmed in the first place. And they had the power to change that. They had the power to avoid that, and they didn't. Now, there are some accidental cases where a person's not at fault in any way. And the Bible mentions those. Somebody can accidentally take the life of someone. And I don't call, poor judgment an accident. I don't call drunk driving an accident. I'm talking about a true accident, like accidents in a workplace, not caused by carelessness. One example that the Bible does give is of someone cutting wood, and the head flies off the axe, and it goes and hits someone, and it kills them. The Bible had designated some cities to be a city of refuge, where the person who'd done that could go and be safe, so the victim's family members don't come out and retaliate against him until an investigation is made. In that case, that person had no ill intention. They had absolutely no control over the matter. The Bible clearly supports the execution of murderers, and it supports justified wars. God has even commanded wars in the past, demanding that the complete eradication of a wicked nation be carried out, lest they rise up and retaliate later. But those decisions are not to be made by me. They're not to be made by you. They are to be made by the governments who set the law. Now, I get it. Governments are not perfect. They make mistakes. They don't always do the right thing, but rest assured, they too will answer to God by not upholding His command with the authority that He gave them. Let's move on into verses 8 through 11. Then God spoke to Noah and to his sons with him, saying, Now behold, I myself do establish my covenant with you and with your descendants after you, and with every living creature that is with you, the birds, the cattle, and every beast of the earth with you, of all that comes out of the ark, even every beast of the earth. I will establish my covenant with you, and all flesh shall never again be cut off by the waters of the flood, neither shall there again be a flood to destroy the earth. Here, God is establishing a covenant not only with Noah, but with all humanity and every animal and every beast of the field. Never again will He destroy the earth with a global flood, such as the one that had just happened. This further shows you that the flood was global. It was not just a local flood. There have been many smaller floods in the world since then, year after year. Severe storms, they do millions in damage every year, but only in certain areas at a time, not the entire planet at once, killing off all life as we know it. And to show us a sign of this covenant He made with Noah so long ago, God gives us a sign that we can still see to this day. We see this in verses 12 through 17. God said, This is a sign of the covenant which I am making between me and you and every living creature that is with you for all successive generations. As I set my bow in the cloud, it shall be for a sign of a covenant between me and the earth. It shall come about when I bring a cloud over the earth, that the bow will be seen in the clouds. And I will remember my covenant which is between me and you and every living creature of all flesh, and never again shall the water become a flood to destroy all flesh. When the bow is in the cloud, then I will look upon it to remember the everlasting covenant between God and every living creature of all flesh that is on the earth. And God said to Noah, This is the sign of the covenant which I have established between me and all flesh that is on the earth. I wonder if at this time when this was said that there was a rainbow right there for Noah and his family to see. It's possible. But if it wasn't, they're going to see it soon enough and they will know. Before, there had never been any rain, but now they are in a world where rain happens and it happens frequently, and a sign can usually be seen by all people during and after the rain. As you know, the rainbow's been around for thousands of years now, but it never ceases to amaze me when you see one. Especially these rare ones. They seem like they're so close and they're so huge, and there's some where both ends are visible at once. You know, we always think of the lore. There's a leprechaun at the end of it and a pot of gold. That's not the case. That's just a myth. I've actually seen a picture on a job site where a rainbow ended right at a porta potty, and I can assure you that is not full of gold inside that thing. Science has this big, long explanation about water particles and sunlight and the waves of light refracting through this at different rates, and that's fine. They don't explain why they're different colors. They don't explain why every time there's a rainbow for thousands of years now, those colors are always in the exact order, but that's okay. I have no problem with science telling me how a rainbow occurs. That's what science is supposed to do, explain how things work. What I find amazing is not how they occur, but why they occur and who put them there to begin with. Thousands of years later, and the world is full of people who, according to Peter's epistles, say that there never was a flood and such a flood could have never happened. God just puts this rainbow out there amongst us and says, I remember. God knows it's real. He knows because he was there. I bet all of those who deny it would get punched in the mouth by Noah if he was there. Try to tell Noah that there never was a flood after all that he endured. I dare you. By the way, did you notice who the rainbow belongs to? Verse 13, God says, I set my bow in the clouds. It belongs to God. The rainbow does not belong to any special interest groups named after the alphabet soup. It's not the LMNOP rainbow. It's a sign from God, recalling a time of judgment upon the earth when it was cleansed from people who were behaving wickedly. Now let us continue on into verses 18 through 24. Now the sons of Noah who came out of the ark were Shem and Ham and Japheth, and Ham was the father of Canaan. These three were the sons of Noah, and from these the whole earth was populated. Then Noah began farming and planted a vineyard. He drank of the wine and became drunk, and uncovered himself inside his tent. Ham, the father of Canaan, saw the nakedness of his father, and told his two brothers outside. But Shem and Japheth took a garment and laid it upon both their shoulders and walked backwards and covered the nakedness of their father, and their faces were turned away so that they did not see their father's nakedness. When Noah awoke from his wine, he knew what his youngest son had done to him. Verses 18 and 19 gave a brief reminder that everyone that is alive on this big ball of mud that we call earth came from one of these three sons of Noah. The whole earth was populated from these three men. It might be unimportant to most people, but this tells me that Noah was done with the baby making business. He is 601 years old when he left the ark, so I don't blame him. But the question remains, how can anybody hate somebody else because of the color of their skin or from what country they're from? We are closer relatives with people than you think. I don't care if you're a pink with zebra stripes, you're no closer to Noah than I am, and I am no more important than you are, because we all come from either Shem, Ham, or Japheth, and they all come from Noah. Think about that. Verse 20 tells us that Noah planted a vineyard. Well, I bet he and his sons planted a lot of things. This one in particular, though, has to do with where the narrative is going, where this event that happens comes from. Again, some time has obviously passed, because a newly planted vineyard's not going to produce enough wine for at least 5 to 10 years. And then you got to add in the time for fermentation on top of that. The passage of time also means that Noah now is a grandpa. He has several grandchildren. Now, we're also given the first mention of drunkenness in the Bible here. Noah was a man of the soil. This was no accidental discovery of fermentation where he drank some grape juice that he'd left sealed somewhere for 6 months and, oh, I got drunk. No, he knew what was going to happen when he drank that. But as I said, Noah has witnessed the death of millions or billions of people. Brothers and sisters of his were lost in that flood, nieces and nephews and neighbors and friends. And I know that this world had seemed so empty and so silent to Noah. For a couple of years, the only ones that were around were immediate family members for conversation. And everybody knows that even fish and family both stink after a few weeks. Plus, there were only a few sets of every animal, and most of them scattered far and wide. Now, yes, they reproduce quickly, but Noah's mornings when he got up to have his coffee were just almost dead silent, much quieter watching the morning sunrise than what we enjoy with birds chirping and animals running around and stuff like that. And sometimes silence can become deafening after a while. Myself, I'm not going to judge Noah. Commentators are quick to call this the sin of Noah, but yet the Bible hasn't called drunkenness a sin yet. But as we can see, it's definitely a learning experience, as it brought nothing but dishonor and regret, much like drinking does today. The commercials today for alcohol show the young folks out on boats, and they're fishing, they're all holding a beer, and they're all laughing. Why don't they be more honest? Why don't they show the funerals, the crashes, the liver failures, the broken homes from drunken abuse and infidelity? They're not going to show you that. I've had a lot of my friends tell me, oh, you're missing out on so much fun, why don't you come with us? Why don't you come drink with us and everything? And I'm like, you know what? You're right. I've missed out on so much fun. I don't get to enjoy puking all over myself and waking up in jail with charges of stuff that I don't remember. I don't get to wake up with a terrible hangover. I guess my definition of fun is a lot different from other people's. Now, I want to address, though, a teaching that has been gaining some popularity, even from teachers that I respect very much, but I just don't agree with it myself. There's a teaching going around that says that Noah was sexually molested by Ham while he was drunk, and they say that's how he knew that something had happened to him when he woke up. When I first heard that, I stopped the message that I was listening to, but more and more people had brought this up. So anytime you hear something, I always say you go to Scripture and you look it up. See if there's anything to this idea. In the Hebrew, the word hithpael means an action that someone does to himself. That's why the NASB version, which I read from, says Noah became drunk and uncovered himself. There's some versions out there that use the verb gala, which means to be stripped naked or to be made bare by someone else is the context. The commentators would say that this is why Noah knew that Ham had done something evil to him when he awoke the next day, and he wouldn't have known it if someone would have just peeked in and saw him. And they also say passages like Leviticus 18 that use the expression of seeing the nakedness of another person as the act of doing something. Really quickly, an example of what they use, Leviticus 18 verses 6 through 8. None of you shall approach any blood relative to uncover nakedness. I am the Lord. You shall not uncover the nakedness of your father, that is, the nakedness of your mother. She is your mother. You are not to uncover her nakedness. You shall not uncover the nakedness of your father's wife. It is your father's nakedness. If you read those verses isolated from the rest of Leviticus 18, it makes it look like that is what is being said. You should, uncovering the nakedness, you might think it means sleeping with. But in the rest of Leviticus 18, there are verses where it plainly says, do not have intercourse with so-and-so. Now, while incest and homosexuality and yes, drunken rape are still wrong, I think that phrase doesn't refer to that here in Noah's case. In the NASB, which I've always found to be closest in accuracy to the original text, so far anyway, that's the closest I've found to it, it clearly says that Noah undressed himself. Thereby, that clears Ham of that charge. So what was the sin of Ham? What was so bad that Noah would pronounce a curse upon Ham's son, Canaan? All of the verses said was that Ham saw the nakedness of his father, and he told his two brothers outside. Literally, the ancient Hebrew says that Ham told them with delight what he saw in his father's tent. He was determined to mock his father and undermine his authority as a man of God. Ham had a chance to show compassion and grace to his father, but he runs outside laughing about it and telling his brothers about it. According to the known number of people in the world at that time, he went out and told 25% of the world's population about his father's mishap when he could have just kept his mouth shut and covered him up. The reason that I believe that Noah did the uncovering himself and the actual sin of Ham was the mockery of his father is the reaction of his two brothers. They averted their eyes. They walked in backwards and covered their father's nakedness, as scripture mentions, therefore they did not see the nakedness of their father. Now, had Ham accidentally walked in and saw Noah and immediately turned away, there would have been no problem. Well, to be honest, he probably would have needed to bleach his eyes. I mean, Noah's somewhere between 610 and 700 years old by this point. I'm certain that nothing was where it's supposed to be. I'm more than 40 and I look like an old bloodhound when I get out of the shower. I couldn't imagine when you're 700 years old. But the contrast was plain. One thought it was funny and belittled his father. The others felt sorry for him and solved the problem in the most respectful way they could. Either way, Noah and Ham are both in the wrong here. There's an old Japanese proverb that says, "Man takes the first drink, the drink takes the second drink, and then the drink takes the man." But we sit here in the 21st century and we see little problem on Ham's part, other than the mockery, of course. Was it really that bad to accidentally see his father naked? For Noah to bring a curse upon his grandson in retaliation? We forget how different our culture is from others. It's hard for modern people to appreciate why seeing another person's nakedness is such an abomination, because nakedness is so prevalent in our society today. It seems like on TV, anytime you turn around, it's nearly nakedness, if not see-through stuff. And, people today, they can't seem to sing unless they're really, really attractive and they're in a swimsuit or wearing something that looks like a fishing lure. It doesn't matter about their voice like it used to be in the old days. Now it's about how they look on CMT and on MTV. All these men have their shirts off, their chest oiled up, wearing these tight breeches, these women wearing as little as possible. Our society has become so sexualized that we've gotten used to it. We are desensitized to the way that our world has become. But in many other cultures, seeing another person's nakedness was a major offense. Keep that in mind as we go into verses 25 through 29. So he said, "Cursed be Canaan, a servant of servants he shall be to his brothers." He also said, "Blessed be the Lord, the God of Shem, and let Canaan be his servant. May God enlarge Japheth, and let him dwell in the tents of Shem, and let Canaan be his servant." Noah lived 350 years after the flood, so all the days of Noah were 950 years, and he died. Now you might be wondering, like I did, why did he curse the grandson? Why did he curse Canaan instead of Ham? See, the problem we see in the text is just like that, is Noah is not actually cursing him. Noah was not a gypsy. Noah was not some mystic that had magical abilities to call a curse upon somebody. Noah has no power to make these things come true. Rather, God was prophesying through Noah things that would take place in the future. Even God was not cursing Canaan for the sins of his father, because God says that the sons of the children shall not suffer for the sins of the father. But through this prophecy that God gave to Noah, God is telling Ham what is going to happen in the future to his son. In Genesis 10, the descendants of Canaan are listed. They are the Sidonians, the Hittites, the Jebusites, the Amorites, the inhabitants of Sodom and Gomorrah. Noah's curse or prophecy actually came true during the time of Joshua. The Canaanites, the descendants of Ham and Canaan, were be conquered by the Israelites, the descendants of Shem. True to God's word, some of the Canaanites became slaves to the children of Israel. Then in 2 short verses, we see the obituary of Noah. Such a remarkable faith in the beginning. By heeding God's command and tackling such a large project without doubt, without excuse, he took part in saving all life on earth as we know it. This is our ancestor that we are reading about. His sons are our distant forefathers. And for such an amazing life, the last record of his life ends with a mar, tarnishing his reputation as blameless. Well, I've got a surprise for you. Christians still sin. All of us, every single, you and I, everybody that's ever walked this earth except for Christ is not sinless. Every time a famous Christian leader or a teacher sins, there's a big uproar in the community and people say, I just can't believe that a man of God could sin like that. You know what? My Bible says that all have sinned and all have fallen short of the glory of God, and no one is without sin. And my Bible says that if we say we are without sin, we deceive ourselves. So yeah, Noah sinned, but I guarantee you that he sinned a lot less than most of us do. And the New Testament remembers him not for his sin that was mentioned here, but for his faithfulness to God. That's evident in Hebrews chapter 11. And I am so thankful that we are that same way. You are not going to be known in heaven as the guy that stole candy from the candy store when he was 9 years old. You're not going to be known for your sin. You won't be known as that lady that gossiped about another lady and backbid other people in the church. You won't be known as the guy that sold somebody in school a cockleburr for $10 and told him it was a porcupine egg. I don't know who would do such a thing as that. You will be known for placing your faith in Christ Jesus, repenting and following him. So our goal should be to end well. You can't change the past, but the future is in our hands as far as our behavior goes. Learn this from this lesson in Genesis chapter 9. Avoid alcohol. Respect your parents even when they mess up, even when they're flawed, even when they make mistakes. Respect them. Don't be like him. Be more like his brothers were here. And don't let the sin of other people cause you to sin. Treat other people with mercy. Treat them with respect. Treat them with compassion. And with that, Noah fades into the spotlight, and the times of men living into their 900s is over. Noah lived longer than any of his ancestors except for 2. Jared made it to 962, Methuselah made it to 969. But even after the flood flushed the depraved world down the drain, sin still reigned, and thus men still died.